Hey everyone.
Hey guys, welcome to Obscure MCU. In this episode, I'll be ranking all of the serums and genetic enhancements in the MCU, and placing them on a tier list based on their successes, usefulness, and just overall how much I'd want to actually use it in real life. So this includes experiments that were done on people that gave them abilities either through science, natural sources, or even by Infinity Stones, whether it was intentional or not. But before I start, I just want to apologize to any Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. fans watching this. I've only seen the first episode, back when it first premiered, and I know there's a lot of Inhumans and other genetic experiments done in that show, but I just haven't seen it, so I won't really be able to include any of those on the list. And just a quick shout out to Michael Tuit2847 for the suggestions in my comments a few weeks ago. Now let's get started. Starting in D tier, first we have the gamma radiation / the Hulk's blood. This was a government attempt to recreate the super soldier serum, which obviously didn't go as planned, but Bruce eventually found a way to manage it. But even with the success of She-Hulk and Smart Hulk, it's not really worth it in my opinion. It'd be nice to have the superhuman strength, but in most cases, if you look at Samuel Stearns or even Emil Blonsky, when you have the Hulk's blood, you get powers, but there's a high chance you'll end up being really deformed physically, or worst case scenario, imprisoned by the government for decades at a time. So though the success rate is almost 100% in terms of giving you some type of ability, either physical or mental, the chances of it just ruining my life in other aspects just really isn't worth it. So bottom of D tier in my opinion. And then right above it on D tier, I'd put the Mind Stone / Loki Scepter. This might be a shocking placement considering the results we've seen with Wanda and how powerful she got, and even Pietro with his speed. But it was revealed in WandaVision that it may not have been the scepter entirely that gave them the powers. They may have had the latent mutant genes or the X gene lingering in them already, which is why they were the only ones to survive Strucker's experiments. They literally said they had many volunteers who've all died. So I don't know, unless I have the X gene and I just don't know it yet, the chances of me surviving any type of gene altering experiments with the scepter is pretty low and not entirely worth the risk in my opinion. So that would go right in D tier above the gamma radiation. Moving up into C tier, I would put Extremis, developed by Advanced Idea Mechanics. At its core, I honestly really like the concept. The idea of targeting a part of the human brain that can trigger self-repair and the ability to heal and regenerate physical damages and deformities is really useful, but they lose me at that fiery side effect. Yeah, you have the ability to regenerate limbs and almost heal from pretty much anything, but even if the transformation is successful, I need to take those capsules in order to regulate the side effects. Like in Iron Man 3, that one dude at the Chinese theater who was all strung out, having to constantly worry about that is just pretty annoying. And worst case scenario, if I ended up self-destructing because of the effect, I'd cause a lot of damages, and yeah, that's not really something that I'd want. The bulletproof body is cool. That's a nice touch, when Rhodey was shooting at them and they were able to just heal instantly. But yeah, I don't know. I put it in C tier. Next up in C tier, we have the chemicals that gave Daredevil his powers. This is one of those cases where it was unintentional. If I did voluntarily go through that procedure that Matt did, it's a pretty big trade-off. So for having visual impairment to extremely heightened senses in every other case, it would take some getting used to, but with some training, I think it would only be beneficial in the long term. I can always tell when someone's lying, which would be really useful. And I'd almost never be surprised by anything either because of the echolocation that Matt basically has. The only thing is I'd have to do some serious martial arts training, which honestly might be a bit easier with the enhanced senses. But of course, the downside is just not being able to see in the traditional sense, so that's on top of C tier. And right above it in C tier would be the PIM particles. Without an Ant-Man suit or access to the quantum realm, they're pretty useless, but when it comes to physical enhancements, plus with the prolonged use of the PIM particles, because Hank kind of hinted at using it for too long has a lot of mental strain, it's risky. But let's just say I did have access to Hank Pym's technology, or if I wanted to be a philanthropist, kind of like what we see with Hope doing in the beginning of Quantumania, you could use it on a global scale to fix deforestation, hunger, a lot of other issues. So it does have its uses, but the only thing is, again, what Hank mentioned with the mental toll that it takes over time, I'm just not sure what the long-term effects would be if I'd end up causing more damages worldwide rather than solving the problems, so it's a bit risky. I put it at the top of C tier because if I were to have the Ant-Man suit, it'd be really useful, but it's not necessarily something that I would choose first. So moving on to B tier, and this is the only entry in this tier, would be the experiments done by the company IGH that gave Jessica Jones her powers. It's a pretty shady experiment from a pretty shady company, but there's no arguing the effectiveness. It's been a while since I've seen season 2 of Jessica Jones, but we have at least 3 confirmed cases shown that it was successful in the MCU, being Wizard, Jessica Jones, and her mom, which is one more successful example than the Scepter, where it was just Pietro and Wanda, so I would take my chances with this one. And it's a lot like the Mind Stone, where the powers aren't guaranteed, because it's not like just the Super Soldier Serum where you know what you're getting. This one could be anything from super speed to super strength to flight. It really ranges, so yeah, there's that uncertainty with it. But again, I'm a lot more confident in taking this one than having an experiment with the Scepter, because we have a bit of a higher survival rate compared to anything else. So yeah, this goes on B tier. Now on to A tier, sticking with the Defenders universe here. I placed the experiments done to Luke Cage right at the bottom of A tier. I don't think there's a specific name for the project that was done, but the intent was to create an artificial skin for burn victims through the process of fusing a subject's DNA with foreign DNA. Of course, that didn't go as planned with the interference from the prison guard, which ended up giving Luke Cage his unbreakable skin and super strength. There honestly aren't many downsides to this either, unless someone intentionally made some experimental weapons with the intent to kill me, but honestly, it's not a bad power to have. Plus, it's not like the Hulk's blood where I'd end up being deformed, so it's like basically the gamma radiation or the effect of Hulk's powers without having the army hunting me down 24/7, so yeah, this one goes in A tier. Now at the top of A tier I have the Super Soldier Serum, but not the original version, specifically the one created by Dr. Nagel in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, that was given to the Flag Smashers and John Walker. It has the same benefits as the original, but just based on what was shown, I'm not sure if it has all of the benefits. You for sure get strength, agility, and speed, but there are some aspects that Steve had that wasn't necessarily shown. Like they specifically mentioned that this one is a bit more subtle, so your body won't change physically, you'll just get the powers. I'm not too sure if you have the enhanced intelligence like Steve does, because to be fair, the only thing they've shown us with John Walker and the Flag Smashers is them just being strong and fast, so yeah, this one goes in A tier. Now moving on to S tier, first up would be the heart-shaped herb from the Black Panther movies. It's basically the Super Soldier Serum, but with the added ability to commune with your ancestors in the spirit realm for guidance and wisdom. So the only downside to the heart-shaped herb compared to the serum is that this one can be removed from your body. So like when we saw T'Challa drink that one elixir to remove the effects during like the ritual combat, there's a chance that you could be tricked or manipulated into getting it removed from your body, and it's not really permanent like the other serums, so that is a downside and a pretty big risk. But aside from that, you get all the benefits that you'd want from the serum: enhanced strength, regenerative healing, stamina, the list just goes on, and that's even without the vibranium suit, so it's pretty beneficial. And next up in the S tier would be the original Super Soldier Serum that was given to Steve. Unlike the other version, this one would transform you physically and just make you just a peak human, so it's an easy fit into S tier. And at the top of the list in S tier would be the effects given to Peter Parker from the radioactive spider. It's basically the Super Soldier Serum, but your strength would be increased even more. We've seen Spider-Man have some bigger feats compared to Steve in terms of how much he can lift and how much he can contain. It's pretty well known that he holds back intentionally with a lot of his fights, so I honestly don't think we've seen like his full potential yet in the MCU. And on top of all that, you can also climb onto any surface, jump crazy heights. Plus, you have the spider sense. So if you were to really just lock in and harness your abilities, you'd be even better than a super soldier with the added benefit of the spider sense. So, I mean, that's an easy top of the list for me. The downside is you'd have to just develop your own web fluid and web shooters. And if you were to learn martial arts on like a level like Daredevil, with the spider sense and the super strength, you'd be pretty unstoppable in my opinion. So that's the complete tier list for the serums and the scientific enhancement that were shown in the MCU. But just for the sake of completion, I'm not too sure if this necessarily counts, but the explosion that gave Captain Marvel her powers, that would easily be at the top of the list. But just because it wasn't necessarily like a scientific experiment or any type of like earthly chemical that would give someone powers, I'm not too sure if that necessarily counts. But if you were to get those powers, you'd instantly be moved to the level of like a demigod, so that's an easy top of the list. But for the sake of the video, I'm not really going to include it, but yeah. So anyways, this was my rankings for all the MCU serums that we've seen so far. Let me know how you'd rank them in the comments, and be sure to like and subscribe for more videos coming soon. Thanks for watching.